Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining today. This is the first in a new series of Payroll and Pastries, the interview series. So my idea is to talk to industry experts within the payroll, HR, finance scope and sphere to understand what's going on in the industry at the moment, to understand what the future of the industry is, and just generally to have a chat with some good people. So today with me, I've got Matt, who is from CIPP, and I will introduce Matt. So Matt.
Hi, yeah, I'm Matt. I'm Policy and Research Officer at the CIPP. So, as part of my job, I'm responsible for keeping the industry updated, writing news articles, delivering presentations, as well as the sort of government advocacy that we do, making sure that we're representing our members and the payroll profession, speaking to HMRC, Treasury, DWP, those sort of people, and making sure that they know what's going on in the world of payroll and that we can shape the future of policy and legislation to make sure that it is fit for purpose, not just for the people it affects, but for the people that have to deal with processing it, the payroll and HR professionals of the world. So that's a big part of the job and a very important task in the payroll world, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. I managed to catch up with Matt at CIPP Live North earlier this week, and I absolutely love the CIPP events. It's a phenomenal experience. So if you haven't been to one before, make sure you try and attend some of the CIPP events. They're always a great way to network with payroll professionals and industry experts. Really get a good feel for what's going on in the industry at the moment. So I was really interested, Matt. How did you get into payroll? I know everyone's got their payroll origin story, and I was just want to know how did you get in there? How did you end up at CIPP?
Yeah, so I originally trained in accountancy, so I did my AAT up until level 4, and I worked within a small family-run business, so it wasn't huge, and I had some responsibilities with the accounts for one of the sort of subsidiary companies, and then at one point my finance manager was going on holiday. They were going off to Australia for 6 weeks. Um, so at some point in that 6 weeks, the payroll needed doing. So I was
Yeah.
asked to pick up the payroll, and that was my very first foray into doing any sort of payroll.
Was it a
Um,
complicated one?
no, not particularly. I think there was probably about 10 employees across two very small payrolls. Most people were salaried. There was a couple of things like
Yeah.
someone had a car payment, and there was obviously the timed workers. But I will admit it was probably a very nice and easy introduction into the payroll world.
I bet
But
some
after
people listen.
that,
I bet some people listening with their 1,000 employee payrolls will be going, "Oh, I could do that with my eyes closed."
well, that leads me on to my first sort of proper payroll job. I started working for a company that did outsourced payroll for the NHS. And as you can imagine, small family run business, NHS is a completely different kettle of fish.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah, I did go from the 10-person payroll to maybe some of them were a couple of
Wow.
thousand people. But it was the temporary staffing, so there was a little bit of intricacy there. There was when I first joined, there was some IR35 stuff because that was just when it sort of tipped over into the new rules, the reforms that we had. Um, so there was a bit more complexity there, and I really enjoyed that. And while I was there, I was sort of payroll administrator. I did the pensions administration, and then I was a team leader there before I got the job at CIPP. And it was one of those things where it was a very strange job spec.
I can
I didn't
imagine.
really know what to expect, but it was very intriguing, and it is a job like no other payroll job. It is very, very different, but I do think that some of the differences really suit me in the way that I work. I sort of quite like diving into the legislation and finding out how things work and pulling things apart and seeing what makes them tick, sort of thing, and then
Yeah.
failing to put them back together again. But that's a different story.
You're like a payroll engineer. No, it's I've been so it's slightly different from my origin story. I started off in the British Army, um, didn't even know what payroll was, didn't even know it was the industry, as you know, thought it was just pushing a button kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then when I left the army, I managed to get a role as a working in some kind of IT support, and then I became the manager of that team. And then the payroll team needed a team manager. It was a people manager role, but going into that role, I really learned a lot about payroll, about Swedish payroll. Actually, I was managing the Swedish payroll team. Don't
Interesting.
get me started about Swedish maternity payrolls. Um, and then from there, I went into account management in payroll, and then into sales, which is where I found myself, where I currently am at phase three. And that's how we met actually in the events, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't think you will ever get a payroll manager that doesn't know anything about payroll
Yeah,
at the start that won't know a hell of a lot about payroll at the end, because you
absolutely.
do just absorb it. And it's not something, no one sits down and learns payroll. There's no 2-week training program to just learn payroll. It's a slow accumulation of knowledge over time, and
Yeah.
anyone can pick it up, but it just takes that time to sort of understand fully what you're doing in your own role.
And without taking anything away from the CIPP educational team, because I know they do an exceptional job, I think a lot of these things you have to get your hands-on experience, don't you? There's so
Oh,
many different
100%.
so many different things that could go wrong, or rule changes that maybe you weren't aware of, or they weren't updated in the systems or whatnot. That I find, you have to be kind of reactive and understand these changes.
Yeah. I suppose you've got, in terms of like the education side of things, you do have the sort of technical foundation, sort of
Yeah,
those like level 3 qualifications that give you that base to build upon. And then the higher level qualifications are more a framework of strategic thinking and leadership and that sort of thing. And they're all, like I said, a foundation for you to build further knowledge upon. And as with any education, once you've done a qualification, that's not it.
yeah,
CPD is a huge thing in this industry. That's why we
right.
run so many events and do so many webinars, to make sure that people stay on top of the knowledge and keep themselves upskilled. Because if you ignored all that, in a year's time, you're going to be out of date and you're going to get something wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. So that brings me nicely onto something I wanted to just discuss quickly. I know obviously one of your roles is, taking the government kind of legislation and changes and updates and what they're wanting to do, and then you're kind of translating that into payroll terms and how that affects our organisation, and then disseminating that information amongst the industry and amongst kind of everyone who's working in payroll. So what are kind of the hot topics in legislation at the moment?
Oh, so I think for me, I find myself bouncing from hot topic to hot topic. I think a
There's a lot
year
going
a
on.
year or so ago, yeah, a year or so ago, I was very much a sort of holiday pay for the irregular hours and part year workers expert, and
Yeah,
that we just sort of fully dove into that and made sure people understood that. At the start of this year, I feel it's been the neonatal care leave and pay. I think that's a huge new thing that's come in, and it's unlike anything else that anyone will have processed before. I
yeah,
suppose with that, just the thing I've been trying to drill into people is, hopefully that is a situation that is not going to happen all too often. And if you get that situation, go and find the information. Don't try and keep it at the top of your head, because it's going to take up room for other stuff that you more desperately need. So I suppose the neonatal is probably the big thing. We're seeing changes with HMRC's enforcement of umbrella companies. So if that's your niche, you need to be aware of things in that area.
yeah,
As always, we've got national minimum wage, and
yeah.
of course, at the moment, a lot of the talk around payroll changes are kind of being morphed with the context of the increase to the national insurance and the cost
Sure.
to employers. So while we don't necessarily represent employers, we are supposed to represent payroll professionals, there is still this concern within the organizations we talk to
Sure.
that the payroll costs that are coming have to be talked about in the context of the additional costs from the national insurance contributions, which obviously is a function of payroll.
Super, super. So, yeah, I mean, what's your first steps when I know that you obviously you was in, I think you was in Parliament last year, wasn't you? You got to speak in one of the government sessions.
Yeah, absolutely. So to kind of like go through the whole process of how we normally deal with things. Sometimes, not very often, we do get a little bit of advanced warning off government because of some of the contacts that we have. But usually not very much.
Yeah.
Just the other week we had a would you like to set up a call? And it was, it was like the morning of when they released all of the extra stuff to do with the timelines of the employment rights bill. And it's like we knew something was coming, we just didn't necessarily know what it was going to be. We just had a little bit of a call. But we get involved in those initial consultations when there's
Yeah.
draft regulations released, when there's conversations happening in terms of how would we like to shape the future of this policy, because the government has an idea, they want that idea enacted, so they pass that through into HMRC, for example. Then they need to come out to us and go, how do you think we should do this? So we try and
Amazing.
get really heavily involved in that. And sometimes, so you mentioned the time in Parliament, that was around the statutory sick pay um, working group that they'd set up to look at statutory sick pay. And ironically, Sam, our policy lead, was supposed to be going, but she was ill. So I
Ah,
went instead, which was fantastic because
I'm sure it's an experience. Yeah.
it was an experience, and I definitely get FOMO with these sort of things. Like, really happy for Sam, really good experience, but like, I'd love to do that myself, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it was good. It was an experience that someone else who was there giving oral evidence, Tina McKenzie from the Federation of Small Businesses,
Yeah.
just casually mentioned in conversation beforehand that she was also there to pick up her MBE, I think it was that day. So it was definitely an experience.
It's just casually getting
Maybe
your
maybe one day.
MBA.
Yeah. um, so we get involved in those sort of things, making sure that we're representing payroll as a profession, not just our members, because we're the Chartered Institute of Payroll Professionals, and part of that charter is that we represent all payroll professionals, not just our members. But obviously, we try and get feedback from our members, give them the value of membership with the CIPP so that we're really feeding back their concerns. And then that flows all the way through to the sort of final implementation of things. When we know what's going to be happening, then it's our job to sort of really break that down and make sure that we can deliver that in really digestible bits of information, whether that's webinars, fact sheets, articles online, articles in our magazine, just making sure anyone can keep up to date with these sort of things, whether they're a payroll manager, payroll administrator, or even an apprentice.
Oh yeah, wow. Last question I had for you, that I wanted to ask is what kind of, I know it's kind of a generic question, what advice would you have for someone just starting their career in payroll? Perhaps they've got their first kind of payroll administrator role and they're looking at, what they can do training wise, experience wise. What advice would you give to someone?
Well, I'm very much a sort of leaf on the wind in terms of sort of my career. I just go with the flow, see where things take me. So maybe I'm not the best person to give advice. However, I would say kind of absorb as much information as you can, and don't be afraid to sort of put your ideas out there. One of the things that we discussed at Payroll Live North was really embracing the strategic nature of payroll. Don't be just the person that pushes the button. Think about the impacts of things that it has on the employees that you're paying, the team that you're in, the compliance. For me on the legislative side, the compliance is a huge thing. And I think you need people within organizations who can look at things and go, are we doing this correctly? And if not, finding a way to move forward. So really just absorb as much information you have, put yourself out there in terms of making sure that you are leading the profession, not just sort of flowing through and just going with the flow. Really sort of make sure that you think of things in a strategic way, because that is the direction that payroll is going, whether we like it or not. We need to be much more in tune with what businesses are doing and what businesses need out of the payroll function, so that we can have a seat at the table, those big head tables with the head of HR and the head of finance. That's always a question of whether payroll should have a seat at that table. And we've got organizations that do. We've got sort of equity partners within big firms now as a payroll professional. I think that's fantastic.
Absolutely. There's I've certainly read enough arguments on LinkedIn to and for having a kind of having a head of payroll at within C-suite. There's some arguments for it, as in it is not necessarily a HR or a finance function. It's had its own merits, but at the same time, adding an extra seat at C-suite level kind of does add more kind of option, less clarity on directions sometimes. So there's definitely arguments for it. I believe personally, it depends on what your business looks like and how your business is modelled. And yeah, absolutely. So Matt, this was an exceptional start to my interview series. I got some really cool insights into your world in CIPP, and I really appreciate that. Last but not least, just to get to know you a little bit better, I've got a little quick fire round. I'm going to ask you this or that questions.
Oh, go on.
Are you ready?
Okay.
Let's go.
Yes. Sorry, quick fire.
Right. Star Trek or Star Wars?
Star Wars.
Payroll or accounting?
Payroll.
Pizza or pasta?
Pizza.
In-house payroll or outsourced?
Oh, outsourced.
And lastly, tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Great. Good man. So I think that lets us get to know a bit more about you. I thought it sounds like something fun to do. So Matt, thanks so much for joining me today.
Not a problem.
It's really been quite insightful, and I hope that our readers and listeners will get to get some understanding of your role in your organisation. So thank you so much. And
no problem. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. Speak to you soon. Thank you.
Catch you a bit. Bye.